Everyone keeps telling you to focus. Pick one thing. Stop jumping between quantum physics and meditation and ancient philosophy like they're related. They're not related, right? But here's what changes everything. They're the same thing, described in different languages. And this isn't scattered thinking. This is searching for the grammar they all share. The Emerald Tablet is that grammar. 13 lines that connect what everyone else keeps separate. Quick context. There's a previous video about who Hermes Trismegistus was, the figure behind this text. If that matters, there's a card linked above. But here's the essential recap. Hermes Trismegistus, historical or mythical, tried to document the universal laws of how reality organizes itself. Left behind texts called the Corpus Hermeticum. The most famous? The Emerald Tablet. 13 lines that influenced Newton's physics, Jung's psychology, alchemists, and 2,000 years of people who refused to separate science from philosophy, from experience. Why 13 lines? Why so short? Why such long influence? That's what this is about. The text and what it means. Not claiming there's a pure reading without interpretation. There isn't. Everything here is interpretation. But working with what the lines actually say, how they've been understood, why they mattered to Newton enough to keep a private translation, why Jung kept returning to them. This won't go deep into any single concept, not because of time constraints, because the content is dense. These ideas need space to sink in. Rushing through them defeats the purpose. Overview first, depth later. 13 lines, 2,000 years, multiple translations, same core patterns. Here's what makes the Emerald Tablet strange. It shouldn't work. 13 lines, some versions have 12, some 14, depending on how the translation counts them, shouldn't be enough to influence centuries of thought. Shouldn't be enough to appear in Newton's private papers, in Jung's psychology, in alchemical texts, in philosophy that spans from medieval Europe to modern consciousness studies. But density isn't the same as length. The tablet isn't long because it doesn't waste language. Every word is load-bearing. Every line is compressed in a way that unpacks into entire fields of inquiry. There are multiple translations. Arabic versions from medieval scholars, Latin translations that moved through Renaissance Europe. Newton kept his own translation, never published, hidden in his alchemical notes. Different versions emphasize different nuances, active versus passive voice, singular versus plural, metaphorical versus literal phrasing. The version used here is the one that became most widespread in Western esotericism, not because it's correct, there is no single correct version, but because it's the one that seeded the most influence, the one that shows up in Newton's notes, the one Jung referenced. So why does something this short have impact this long? Because it's not trying to be comprehensive. It's not a textbook. It's not even trying to explain itself fully. It's stating axioms, foundational principles, the kind of statements that don't get proven, they get tested by whether the system they generate is coherent, whether it maps to observable reality, whether it keeps being useful across different contexts. The tablet is source code, not documentation. It's the algorithm, not the examples. Once the pattern is visible, it can be applied anywhere. That's why it's short. That's why it lasts. The text will be organized into 3 major concepts here, 3 keys: correspondence, polarity, transformation. This makes it possible to give an overview before going deeper into each concept in future work. The first key unlocks how reality organizes itself. It starts with the line everyone knows and everyone misunderstands. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracle of one thing. This is the line everyone knows. As above, so below. It's been printed on posters, tattooed on forearms, stripped of context until it sounds like generic mysticism. But here's what it actually means.
Correspondence, self-similarity across scales. Reality organizing itself according to patterns that repeat, whether looking at galaxies or neurons or coastlines. The original Hermetic context, the spiritual plane mirrors the material plane. The macrocosm reflects in the microcosm. What happens in divine realms corresponds to what happens in earthly realms. A claim about vertical correspondence between levels of reality. Modern science doesn't use that language, but it sees the pattern. Fractals demonstrate this directly, the same structure repeating at every zoom level. The equation that creates a fern leaf creates a coastline, creates a galaxy's spiral arms. Different substrates, same algorithm. Benoit Mandelbrot showed that infinite complexity can emerge from simple recursive rules. The pattern doesn't change, only the scale. Network theory sees it in organization. Neural networks, social networks, ecological networks, the internet, all follow similar structural principles. Small world properties, preferential attachment, scale-free distributions. The structure organizing the brain resembles the structure organizing civilization. Different content, same architecture. Evolution demonstrates it in origin. All life on Earth traces back to a single common ancestor. Every organism, bacteria, trees, humans, is a variation on the same fundamental biochemistry: DNA, ATP, cellular respiration. The core code is identical. The adaptations are what differ. One origin, infinite expressions through structured variation. This goes beyond metaphor. It's the same principle expressing itself in different domains. Reality has syntax. Learn it once, recognize it everywhere. As above, so below is saying, stop treating each domain as unique. They're not. They're instances of universal patterns. If the pattern is understood at one scale, there's a map for every other scale. Reading about how ecosystems self-regulate through feedback loops and immediately recognizing that's also how the nervous system maintains homeostasis, how markets find equilibrium, how conversations reach mutual understanding. Different content, same process. That recognition, that click, that's seeing correspondence. That's reading the pattern beneath the pattern. The tablet continues, and as all things have been and arose from one by the mediation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. Not multiple separate origins, one origin, infinite expressions. From this one thing by adaptation. Not random, not chaotic, structured variation from a common source. That's the first key. Correspondence, patterns that repeat, self-similarity across scales, one origin, infinite expressions.
Second key, creation through polarity. Correspondence showed patterns repeating across scales, but how do things come into being in the first place? How does creation actually happen? The tablet addresses this. Its father is the sun, its mother is the moon. The wind carried it in its belly, the earth is its nurse. This describes complementary forces that together produce something neither could create alone. Sun, active principle, outward energy, the force that expands, radiates, initiates. Moon, receptive principle, inward integration, the force that absorbs, reflects, gestates. Wind, movement, transfer, the medium through which influence travels. Earth, ground, stability, the substrate where potential becomes actual. Every generative process requires complementary forces, inhale and exhale, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, action potential and resting potential in neurons, anabolism and catabolism in metabolism. Not one force dominating, both forces necessary. The dynamic between them is what creates. Modern physics sees this in wave-particle duality, matter-antimatter pairs. The electromagnetic spectrum is oscillation between electric and magnetic fields, complementary aspects of the same phenomenon. Cognition works this way: focus and diffuse modes of thinking, both required for problem solving. New ideas can't be generated without diffuse mode, can't be refined without focused mode. Neither is superior. The cycle between them is the work. The wind carried it in its belly. Information transfer, signal transmission, neurons firing, data packets moving through networks, memes spreading through culture. The pattern doesn't just exist, it travels, it propagates through a medium. The earth is its nurse, embodiment. The abstract requires a physical substrate to manifest. Thought requires neurons. Software requires hardware. Potential requires actualization. The pattern needs ground to grow in. The next line: this is the father of all perfection in the whole world. Perfection here doesn't mean flawlessness, it means completion, what the Greeks called teleos, the thing reaching its intended form. An acorn becoming an oak isn't better than the acorn, it's the acorn completing its pattern. Perfection as fulfillment of intrinsic potential, not external judgment. The text claims this process, correspondence plus complementary forces working together, is how everything reaches completion, not through force, not through domination, through alignment with pattern. Second key, polarity, complementary forces, creation through dynamic tension, not through singular action. Third key, transformation. Correspondence showed patterns repeating. Polarity showed how things come into being through complementary forces. Now, how things change, refine, evolve. The tablet gives instruction. Separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, gently and with great ingenuity. This confuses people. Separate? Isn't the whole point that everything's connected? But here's what it actually means. Separation as discernment, as refinement, as learning to distinguish without destroying the relationship. Fire and earth aren't opposites to be chosen between. They're different densities of the same thing. Fire is energetic, volatile, transformative. Earth is solid, stable, receptive. Both are needed, but knowing which is being worked with at any given moment, that's the skill. The subtle from the gross, learning to distinguish signal from noise, essence from accident, pattern from randomness. Not destroying the randomness. Variation is needed for adaptation, but learning to see through it to the underlying structure. Gently, not violently, not forcing. Refinement isn't destruction, not rejecting the gross to elevate the subtle. Learning to see them as different expressions of the same thing, operating at different scales. With great ingenuity. This takes skill. Discernment is an art. Knowing when to separate and when to integrate, when to analyze and when to synthesize, when to focus and when to broaden. That's the work. There's no formula. It requires intelligence, attention, practice. This discernment isn't the end. It's what makes iteration possible. Once there's ability to distinguish subtle from gross, the cycle can begin. The tablet continues with process. It ascends from earth to heaven and descends again to earth, and receives the power of the superiors and of the inferiors. Iteration, refinement through cycles, starting with something concrete, earth, extracting the pattern, ascending to heaven to abstraction, then returning that understanding to the concrete, descending to earth, now enriched with both perspectives. Science works this way. Observation leads to theory, leads to prediction,
leads to new observation. Each cycle refines understanding, not just theorizing, testing, not just testing, integrating the results into new theory, ascent and descent, abstract and concrete, both movements necessary. Personal growth works this way, having an experience, concrete, embodied, messy, reflecting on it, ascending to meaning, to pattern recognition, then applying that understanding to new situations, descending with enhanced capacity. The cycle repeats. Each iteration builds on the last, receives the power of the superiors and of the inferiors, integration of high and low, abstract and concrete, theory and practice. The power doesn't come from choosing one, it comes from holding both. When intellectual understanding connects with lived experience, if that's happened, the feeling is unmistakable. The concept studied suddenly making visceral sense. That moment of integration, that's receiving the power of superiors and inferiors. That's the click. Third key, transformation. Refinement through discernment, evolution through cycles, integration of abstract and concrete.
So why do 13 lines matter this much? Because brevity isn't superficiality. The tablet isn't short because it's incomplete. It's short because it's stating axioms, foundational principles from which everything else derives. Look at what it doesn't do. It doesn't build arguments from evidence. It doesn't walk through proofs step by step. It doesn't provide examples or case studies or detailed explanations. It states principles. Axioms don't get proven, they get tested. Not by whether they're true in some absolute sense, but by whether the systems they generate are coherent, whether they map to observable reality, whether they remain useful across contexts. The tablet has been tested for 2,000 years, across cultures, across disciplines, across paradigm shifts in how humans understand reality, and the patterns it describes keep appearing. This is framework, not dogma. It's not telling what to believe, it's offering a way to see. Once the structure is visible, correspondence across scales, creation through complementary forces, transformation through cycles, it can be applied to anything. Physics, biology, psychology, linguistics, systems theory, personal experience. That's why Newton kept coming back to it, not because he believed in alchemy as mystical transmutation, but because he saw the same patterns in gravitational systems, in light, in motion. The mathematics he was discovering looked like what the tablet described. Newton's private translation of the Emerald Tablet stayed hidden in his papers for centuries. He never published it, but it was there, alongside his revolutionary physics. He saw correspondence. Universal gravitation wasn't two separate theories for heavens and earth, but one equation working at every scale. The same inverse square law for planets and projectiles. As above, so below, expressed in mathematics. Jung saw it in the psyche, the conscious and unconscious working as complementary forces, not opposing ones. The process of individuation as transformation through integration, ascending to awareness, descending to embodied change, cycling between them. Shadow work as separating the subtle from the gross, discernment without rejection. Jung's entire analytical psychology is hermetic in structure, whether he admitted it explicitly or not. He referenced the Emerald Tablet constantly, particularly in his later work on alchemy and synchronicity. Alchemists used the tablet as their core text, not because they were trying to literally turn lead into gold, though some were, but because they saw transformation as a universal process. The refinement of metals mirrored the refinement of consciousness. The separation of elements mirrored the separation of thought from conditioning. Same pattern, different substrates. When alchemy became chemistry, the spiritual dimension dropped out, but the method remained. Purification through separation, iteration through cycles, testing through observation. The Hermetic process stripped of its ontological claims, but still operating on the same structure. This is why the tablet keeps resurfacing, not because of mystical authority, but because the patterns it describes are real patterns. Anyone sufficiently attentive encounters them. Scientists call it emergence, scaling laws, self-organization. Psychologists call it integration, growth, development. Different vocabulary, same observations. The text survived because the structure it points to is stable. Correspondence works. Complementary forces create. Transformation happens through cycles. These aren't beliefs, these are descriptions of how things actually operate. The tablet's influence didn't stay in one domain. It leaked everywhere. Hermeticism shaped the Renaissance, not just esoterically, intellectually. The idea that there were universal principles connecting all knowledge, that studying one domain revealed insights about others, that correspondence meant something could be learned from everything. This wasn't mysticism interfering with science. This was the foundation that made interdisciplinary thinking possible. Paracelsus used Hermetic principles in medicine. The microcosm-macrocosm relationship meant studying universal processes revealed how the body worked. As above, so below applied to healing. What affected the cosmos affected the organism. The scientific method itself carries Hermetic structure: hypothesis, experiment, observation, revision. That's ascent and descent. Abstract to concrete, concrete to abstract, cycling until understanding refines. The spiritual language dropped away, but the process remained. Modern systems theory rediscovers correspondence without calling it that. Emergent properties, self-similarity, fractal organization, scaling laws. These are Hermetic observations in mathematical language. The vocabulary changed, the pattern recognition didn't. Quantum mechanics brought complementarity back explicitly. Wave-particle duality isn't a contradiction, it's polarity. Light behaves as both depending on observation. Complementary aspects of the same phenomenon. Bohr even designed a coat of arms with yin-yang symbolism and the phrase contrarius sunt complementa. Opposites are complementary. Consciousness studies keep circling back to the integration problem. How does subjective experience arise from objective processes? How do abstract thoughts connect to concrete neural activity? These are Hermetic questions: ascent and descent, the relationship between levels of organization. The tablet doesn't answer these questions definitively, but it offers a structure for thinking about them, a framework that's been tested across contexts and keeps proving useful. 3 keys: correspondence, patterns repeating across scales; polarity, creation through complementary forces; transformation, refinement through cycles. Those patterns are observable. They're not beliefs, they're descriptions of structure that shows up wherever attention is paid closely enough. But here's what hasn't been addressed. Why? Why does reality organize itself this way? What generates these patterns? Why does correspondence work? Where do these universal principles come from? The tablet describes what happens. It doesn't explain why it happens. The Hermetic tradition offers a starting point for that question, a principle that underlies the 3 keys. The all is mind. The universe is mental. That's not what it sounds like. It's not positive thinking. It's not your thoughts create reality. It's an ontological claim about what's fundamental, consciousness or matter, an inversion of the usual starting point. Next video goes there, the principle of mentalism.